The foghorn at Hollow Reef sounded twice that evening, the way it always did when the lake breathed cold over the warm cliffstone, and Renata Vesely heard it through the open windows of her own cottage, while 40 strangers drank her water and ate off folding tables on her deck. She had parked at 5:12, the dashboard clock glowing through the mist, and she had counted the cars before she counted the people. 9 vehicles she did not recognize. A catering van with its rear doors flung open. A drone hanging over her roofline like a patient wasp, its rotor whine threading under the music. The smell reached her before the noise did. Charcoal, sunscreen, somebody's citronella, drifting off the wrong side of her own cedar fence. Renata did not hurry. She had spent 23 years walking toward wreckage that other people ran from, and she had learned that the first thing you do at a scene is not feel. You fix the time. You note the light. You photograph before you touch anything, because the weather and the well-meaning will erase a story faster than any liar. So she stood at the foot of her own gravel drive, the gravel she had raked herself in April, and she took out her phone and began to record. A slow pan, left to right. The van's plate, the drone's registration sticker just legible against the white sky. The faces, the young man at her gate handing arriving guests little turquoise cards. Community Lake Evening, printed beneath a palm tree logo that made no sense at all on a lake in Wisconsin. Taped to her front door was an orange notice, laminated, official-looking from 12 feet away. She read it twice without removing it. This residence has been incorporated into association amenities per Section D7, Hollow Reef Cottage Association. There was no Section D7. Renata had read the covenants the week she closed, the way she read everything, twice and then once more aloud, and she could have recited the index from memory. The orange paper had precisely as much legal weight as a child's crayon drawing. Someone had been very confident she would not know that. "Ma'am?" A woman crossed the deck toward her, a clipboard pressed to her chest like a breastplate. 50s, linen slacks, a lanyard, the bright, tight smile of a person performing authority for an audience. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back. This is a private community function." "This is my house," Renata said. The woman laughed, short and theatrical, calibrated for the nearest guests. "I'm Lana Sundquist, president of the association. The cottage is a shared amenity now. We voted it at the meeting. You really ought to come to the meetings." Renata looked at her the way she had once looked at a flight recorder before anyone dared open it, without heat, with the patience of someone who already knows the box will speak for itself. Then she raised the phone an inch higher and kept filming. She did not attend the meetings because she had bought this cottage in order to stop attending things. Daniel had died 14 months earlier, a long and quiet illness, the kind that teaches patience whether a person wants the lesson or not. And afterward, she had taken her pension from the Federal Accident Board and bought a 100-year-old fisherman's cottage on a shelf of limestone above Lake Michigan, because the water there sounded like nothing, and the fog erased the rest of the world for hours at a time. That had been the entire plan. Outlast the grief somewhere no one needed a timeline rebuilt. "You changed my lock code," Renata said. It was not a question. Lana's smile did not move, but something behind it did. "The association keeps spare access for wellness checks. It's in the welcome packet." "I never signed a welcome packet." "Everyone signs the welcome packet." That night, Renata asked the strangers, evenly, to leave her property. A few looked stricken and drifted toward the gate. Most did not. A man in a salmon shirt told her to let the kids enjoy their evening. A woman, 2 tables down, gray-haired and uneasy, set down her cup and would not meet anyone's eyes. Renata noted her, the way she noted everything, and filed her away. Lana produced a second laminated sheet, a voluntary amenity dedication, bearing a signature. Renata's signature. one she had never written in her life. She did not argue with the forgery. She photographed it from 2 angles. Then she called the sheriff's non-emergency line, and a young deputy named Toby Pelletier arrived 20 minutes later, took one slow look at the embossed seal and the recorded number printed across the bottom, and handed her the first refusal of many. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. If there's a signed dedication and a recorded covenant behind it, this is a civil matter. You'd have to take it to court." He said it the way a young man says a sentence he has been taught and does not entirely believe. The party ended only because the cold rolled in off the water, and the fog thickened until the drone could no longer hold the sky. Lana left last. At the gate she turned, the clipboard still against her chest. "Come to the meeting next time," she said, almost kindly, and drove off in a hatchback with a home equity statement she did not know was visible, riding shotgun on the passenger seat. Renata downloaded the caterer's drone highlight reel from the association's social page before anyone thought to take it down. She bagged the orange notice off her door in a gallon freezer bag, wrote the date on it in marker, and set it on the kitchen table where Daniel's reading glasses had sat for a year because she had not been able to move them. You preserve the wreckage before the weather takes it. That part of her had never retired. The retaliation came faster than the apology that never came at all. Within 4 days, a company she had never heard of, North Coast Property Management, mailed her a special assessment of $800 and a cease and desist, accusing her of interfering with a community amenity. While she drove the 40 minutes to Sturgeon Bay for certified copies, a second event was booked at her cottage, and the lock code changed again. A lien notice followed, then a second, heavier letter threatening to record it against her title. Renata pulled the county record herself, standing at the counter in the register's office, and read the line 3 times. The voluntary amenity dedication was recorded, filed, stamped, official, sitting on her title like a stain on a wing. There was now a cloud on her deed, placed there by a piece of paper she had never signed. And when she copied down the parcel numbers and matched them, that night, against the addresses North Coast managed, she found the same recorded dedications sitting on 4 other empty cottages along the shore. This was not a woman with a clipboard. This was a machine, and it had been running quietly for a while. That was the night she finally climbed into the attic and unrolled the thing she had noticed at closing and ignored for a year. A survey plat on linen cloth, brittle and tea-brown at the folds, with a faded association seal and a date inked into the corner in a draftsman's careful hand. 1971. She carried it 2 cottages down to Iris Quintero, who had spent 31 years as a deputy register of deeds before she retired to grow tomatoes that, by every rule of latitude, should not have grown that far north, and grew anyway, out of what Iris called pure spite. Iris put on her glasses, ran a knuckle along the chain of title the linen implied, and went very still. "There's an original covenant under all of this," she said, "filed with the founding plat. And if it reads the way these old ones usually read," she tapped the seal, "commercial use of the cottages is forbidden, outright. No rentals, no events, no fee-paid access, nothing." Recorded by whom? It took Iris 3 days in the bound volumes the county had never digitized, the ones that smelled of dust and old glue. She found it on a Thursday and called Renata to the long oak table and turned the heavy book around so the light fell on 2 names at the foot of the page. The covenant had been commissioned and recorded by the association's founder, a man named Sundquist, and it had been drafted in a young attorney's tight, upright hand by the lawyer of record for the filing, Emil Vesely. Renata sat down without deciding to. Iris watched her and said nothing, because 31 years at a county counter teaches a person when a name has landed somewhere private. Emil Vesely had been Daniel's father. He had drawn up the rule that made the whole scheme void, 55 years before his daughter-in-law would stand on the same shore and need it. Renata did not explain. She only laid her hand flat on the page for a moment, the way you touch a thing to be sure it is real, and then she said, "Make me 3 certified copies." The caterer came next, on his own, before she could find him. Hari Bansal had been stiffed by North Coast on $12,000 and was angry enough to bring her everything: the contract, signed not by the association, but by a shell called Reef Amenity Holdings, and a fat clip of invoices. Renata laid it all on the dining table beside the drone reel and did the one thing she had always known how to do better than anyone in any room. She built a timeline. She pulled the metadata from the drone footage, every frame geotagged and time-stamped to the second. She matched those against the public log from the NOAA weather buoy a mile offshore, which recorded wind and air temperature every 10 minutes and could not be bribed. She matched both against the timestamps on her own 2 trail cameras, the ones she had mounted under the eaves the week she moved in, out of a habit Daniel used to tease her about. Minute by minute, the day assembled itself on her table, the way she had once reconstructed the last 90 seconds of a regional jet from 3 clocks that disagreed and 1 that did not. And in a single frame of the drone reel, in the soft background behind a child mid-cannonball, a man in a North Coast windbreaker stood pressing the orange notice flat against her front door at 12:03 in the afternoon, hours before the first guest arrived, while Lana smiled at the gate. Toby Pelletier, who had been quietly ashamed of the words "civil matter" ever since he had said them, took the forgery package to the county attorney himself and came back to help her file a report. Renata retained a real estate attorney out of Green Bay, Delia Okafor, who read the file in one sitting, set down her pen, and said only, "They recorded a forged dedication. That isn't a dispute. That's a quiet title action and a referral, and I would like both." They drafted a complaint to quiet title under Chapter 841 and moved for a temporary restraining order to stop the bookings. Discovery is where the floor gave way. The subpoena duces tecum to North Coast, emails, contracts, the shell company's filings, showed that Lana Sundquist was not the top of the pyramid at all. She was a lever someone else had found and pulled. North Coast's regional director, a man named Garrett Maurer, had discovered her first 2 clumsy rentals of empty cottages 18 months earlier and had not reported her. He had recruited her. The internal messages ran in a straight, cold line. Rent the vacant places, forge the dedications, record them so each title looked clouded enough to frighten the owner into selling cheap or staying silent. Then repeat the pattern across 4 associations in 3 counties. Short-term rental money, washed through Reef Amenity Holdings and out the other side. There was enough interstate booking traffic in it that the county attorney's notes began to carry 2 new words in the margin: wire fraud. North Coast did not fold. It countersued Renata for disparagement, sent 3 lawyers in 2 cars, and leaned on the gray-haired neighbor from the party, Marnie Dahl, who had set down her cup and looked at no one, until she withdrew the statement she had quietly given Toby. A lawyer had sat in Marnie's kitchen and explained, gently, what a defamation judgment could do to a widow on a fixed income. Marnie called Renata in tears and could not finish a sentence. Renata told her, evenly, to keep her own counsel and protect herself first, and meant it, and hung up, and stood a long time at the window where the fog was coming in. And then, on a Tuesday near midnight, Lana Sundquist knocked at Renata's door. Not with a clipboard, with nothing in her hands at all. "I need you to understand," Lana said, and the deck performance was entirely gone from her voice. "After the divorce, I had a line of credit I couldn't carry. My father built this association out of nothing, 16 cottages and a gravel road, and it's the only thing of his I have left. Maurer found out about the first 2 rentals. He told me I'd lose the house and go to prison unless I kept going and grew it. She pressed the heels of both hands against her eyes. I told myself I was bringing the place back to life. 40 people on a deck, music over the water. I told myself that. Renata made her tea, because that was what Daniel would have done, and did not soften the rest. But she saw it plainly now. The predator on the deck and the drowning woman in the kitchen were the same person, and the law was about to come down on both of them at once, and only one of them had drawn the rope. The judge declined to grant the restraining order on the papers alone. Money damages, he noted dryly, are rarely irreparable, and a booked party is a quantifiable thing. He would not enjoin anyone without both sides in the room. He set the matter for an expedited preliminary injunction hearing instead. For 3 more weeks the bookings stayed technically legal, and the stakes climbed, and Renata built her stand the way she had built 100 of them, not to make a jury weep, but to hang a clock on the wall that no living person could argue with. When the parties finally stood in circuit court, she was ready. Delia Okafor put the foundation in first. The certified covenant of 1971, on its linen, the founder's own seal and the draftsman's careful hand forbidding every commercial use that North Coast had built its entire scheme upon. The judge held the cloth up to the light himself. Renata, sworn and seated, looked at the second name at the foot of that page across the courtroom, and let it carry whatever it carried, and let no one see. Then came the board. It was 4 feet wide, and it told the day minute by minute. The drone metadata along the top, the NOAA buoy log beneath it, her 2 trail cameras below that, the catering invoices anchoring the bottom corner. Renata walked the court through it the way she walked through a debris field, without drama, 1 timestamp at a time, until the rows locked together like teeth and the whole afternoon clicked shut. 12:03, the man in the windbreaker, the notice on the door before a single lawful guest had set foot on the property. A handwriting examiner testified that the signature on the voluntary amenity dedication was a forgery, an imitation by an unpracticed hand. And Renata's own records showed, on the date the dedication claimed she had signed it on her deck, that she had been 190 miles away in Madison, on the witness stand of another courtroom, giving expert testimony in the appeal of an old crash, a fact stamped into a court transcript no one could quietly edit. Hari Bansal testified to the shell, to the unpaid $12,000, to who had handed him the contract. The subpoenaed emails were read aloud, and Garrett Maurer's deposition was read directly after them, and his own sentences contradicted his own sentences until the contradiction was the only thing left in the room. Lana, called by neither side and compelled by both, broke on the stand and confirmed the coercion, and the buoy log confirmed Lana, and the metadata confirmed the buoy. And on the second morning, Marnie Dahl walked in without being subpoenaed, sat in the gallery until the recess, and then told Delia Okafor that she would like to sign her statement again, in front of everyone this time, and let the North Coast lawyers do their worst. She was a widow on a fixed income, she said, not a coward, and she had gotten the two confused for a few bad weeks. She testified that afternoon. The 3 lawyers in 2 cars did not, in the end, do their worst, because there was no longer any worst left that the clock on the wall had not already done. The court entered judgment quieting title in Renata's favor and declared every voluntary amenity dedication in the scheme void from the moment of its filing. A lis pendens froze the rentals. The forgery and the fraud went to the prosecutor as a package, and the evening on Renata's deck was restyled, in the careful language of the criminal complaint that followed, as unlawful entry into a dwelling. North Coast collapsed under the weight of its own subpoenas within the year, the way a structure fails once the load finds the crack. Garrett Maurer was indicted on federal wire fraud counts that had nothing warm in them anywhere. Lana Sundquist, whose own emails proved she had been a hammer before anyone made her a victim, was offered a plea that cost her the presidency, her father's association, and a felony she would carry for good. But not the years that Maurer would serve. Renata did not press for more. She had rebuilt enough final 90 seconds in her life to know the difference between a cause and a thing caught in the chain, and she had no appetite for crushing the second when she had the first by the throat. The association rewrote its bylaws that autumn. An anti-retaliation clause, an explicit ban on commercial use that simply restated, almost word for word, what Renata Vesely had written in 1971. A requirement that any dedication be notarized with the owner present and breathing. Toby Pelletier made full deputy and stopped saying sentences he did not believe. Iris Quintero took a paid seat consulting on the digitization of the very volumes that had saved them, and grumbled about the pay, and did it beautifully. Hari catered the association's fall gathering, and this time, in writing and on time, someone paid him. On the last warm evening of the season, Renata Vesely threw a party on her own deck, by her own invitation, with her own water. Iris brought tomatoes that had no business ripening that far north, and had ripened anyway. Toby came off shift and ate 3 plates, and apologized to no one, which was correct, because he had done the right thing in the end, and Renata had told him so. Marnie Dahl brought a hot dish, and sat where she could see the water. Hari grilled, and refused to let anyone help. The fog came in off the lake around 9, soft and total, swallowing the cars and the road and the rest of the county, and the horn sounded twice, and the neighbors she had actually chosen raised their cups into the white. Inside, above her desk, 2 things hung in matching frames. On the left, the laminated orange notice she had bagged off her door, Section D7, the section that had never existed and never would. On the right, the linen plat from 1971, the founder's seal, and her late husband's father's careful hand, still legible after 55 years on the shelf and 1 good year on the wall. Beneath them both, on a small brass plate she had ordered the week the judgment cleared, 4 lines were engraved in plain serif type. Section D7 does not exist. It never did. The covenant from 1971 does. Always read the old paper first. Renata Vesely never raised her voice once, and that was the whole strategy. What beat Lana Sundquist and the company behind her was not anger, but a habit 30 years deep. Fix the time, note the light, photograph before you touch. Carried straight out of an accident investigator's career and into a fight over a lakeside cottage. The legal machinery was almost boring in its certainty. A quiet title action under Wisconsin's Chapter 841 to clear the forged dedication off her deed, a forged signature that collapsed the instant a handwriting examiner and a court transcript put her 190 miles away, and a 55-year-old covenant, drafted, as it turned out, by her own late husband's father, that flatly forbade the commercial use the whole scheme was built on. A laminated notice citing Section D7 was never law. It was a bet that she wouldn't read the real paper, and she had already read it twice, and once more aloud. The drone metadata, the buoy log, and 2 trail cameras did the rest, hanging a clock on the wall that no witness could argue with. The lesson sits quietly under all of it. The oldest recorded document almost always outranks the newest confident one, and the person who keeps their receipts usually wins the room. She even left Lana a way to stand up, because she could tell the hammer from the hand that swung it. What would you have done? Taken the gate down that first night, or started filming?